I give the floor to Iris Pupella Noguès from the Université Paris-Est and the Università de Trieste. She will talk about fascist monuments and their divided memories in Trieste and Bolzano. Iris, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, okay, very well. Go ahead, Iris.
Perfect, thank you. Well, thank you very much for letting me presenting my paper today. I'm very glad to be not with you, but to see you at least. I hope you're not too angry. I will try to intellectually feed you with this paper. So fascist Italy is the state that has the most politically invested architecture in Europe. And in the city of Trieste and Bolzano, annexed by Italy just after the First World War, architecture and monuments were used to Italianize the urban spaces, to create a national collective identity at any cost. And there are too many examples, but the Monumento alla Vittoria of Bolzano and the Monumento ai Caduti of Trieste became national monuments as they incarnated the victory of Italy over the Habsburg Empire. And they also were used as symbols to represent the two cities for the rest of the country. So in Bolzano, fascism planned an entirely new Italian quarter on the west side of the river Talfer. And with its broad streets and vast squares, it stands in clear contrast with the small and narrow spaces of the historical Tyrolean city center. As you can see, the new Italian one is the one circled in red. In Trieste, fascism completely destroyed and restructured the old town, and it created a lot of several political buildings, such as the Casa del Fascio, which was built right in front of the ancient Roman theater, which was excavated by fascism in 1939. But we can also add the construction of the university, as you can see, and also the Piazza Oberdan, the Oberdan Square, which is right behind the gray circle. So local monuments gained national, we can see monument status for several reasons. I'm starting with Bolzano, where the Monumento alla Vittoria was designed by Marcello Piacentini, who was one of the most important architects of the regime, which in a certain way underline the importance that has been given to this first monument, fascist monument ever erected in the city and inaugurated in 1928. So the monument represents an arc dedicated to the victory of Italy over the empire. And inside the monument, you have the busts of Cesare Battisti, Damiano Chiesa, and Fabio Filzi, who are Italian patriots considered as heroes for the fascist regime. And also on the top of the monument, there is an inscription when you can read, "Here at the border of the fatherland, set down the banner. From this point, we educated the others to language, law, and culture," which is obviously directly aimed to the Germanophone community, which are the others. And on his visit to the city on the 4th of September 1935, Mussolini directly went to visit the monument. And I have a video to show you this visit of Mussolini in the city. I hope you can see it. So this is the visit of the monument. Here's the busts. And here's the back of the monument. Okay. It's a little part of a much huge video of the old visit of Mussolini in Bolzano. Okay. Okay, no, not the second time. Okay. In Trieste, I wanted to show you the Monumento ai Caduti, who was designed by a Triestine sculptor named Attilio Selva, and also the architect Enrico Del Debbio, who designed the Forum Mussolini and the Farnesina Palace in Rome. So the monument represents a very dramatic war scene with 5 naked and very muscular men. And there is, and for me it's more important, an inscription that appears on the marble pedestal where is written Trieste to the dead of the Liberation War 1915-1918. And this is completely linked to how the fascism, and especially in Trieste, saw the First World War as the war of liberation for the city. So it was inaugurated in 1935 during a very important, as you can see, ceremony where the king, Vittorio Emanuele III, the third one, was present to officially inaugurate the monument. And you can see him on the picture on the right. So those scenes of, we might say, jubilation from the population, from the inhabitants, and all those sumptuous, important ceremonies don't mean that this monumentality is fully accepted by the locals, and especially from the minorities, the minority of the regime, such as the Germanophone community or also the Slavic communities during the fascism. So I have just 2 examples. The first one is when the Slovene anti-fascist group Tigr put a bomb right next to the Lighthouse of Victory on the 5th of January 1913. So it did not make any serious damages, but they attacked the lighthouse because it was indeed the fascist monument, and it was the first one that was erected in the city in 1927. And also other examples, at the fall of fascism on the 25th of July 1943, a lot of fascist artifacts were destroyed in numerous spontaneous acts, such as here in the University of Trieste, where you can see the sculpture that represents Mussolini was attacked with all kinds of objects. As you can see, his face is quite destroyed, but you can always recognize his face and his profile. So from September 1943 to the summer of 1945, both of the cities were occupied by the Third Reich. And then Bolzano starts its democratic process with the creation of the Südtiroler Volkspartei on the 8th of May 1945, which had since the beginning the will to defend the rights of the Germanophone community after the violent denationalization operated during fascism. And fascist monuments are quite in the center of the polemics and materialize the tension between the 2 communities. And in fact, the Monumento alla Vittoria remained used by the Italian community to commemorate the First World War, but also to emphasize the Italianity of Bolzano, even after the Second World War. So 2 voices were then in opposition. The one who considered the monument untouchable because it commemorates the dead of the First World War, and the other voice which wanted its destruction. So since the end of the Second World War, there have been numerous public demonstrations organized by political movements and associations where the Monumento alla Vittoria was the heart of the contestations. Until the climax, we might say on the 1st of October 1978, where a bomb exploded at the Monumento alla Vittoria, which caused serious damages, and after which the monument was fenced and in fact made inaccessible for quite a long time. In Trieste, from the 9th of June 1945, the city was managed by the Allied military government of occupied territories, and it became the Free Territory of Trieste. So during this period, Anglo-Americans reused some of the fascist buildings, such as the police station, which was primarily the Casa del Fascio, as headquarters. So, and this happened actually a lot in one way because there was no specific policy of defascistization to eliminate the traces of the dictatorships from all Italian cities. But in another way, it's also because it satisfies some practical, simple needs. Also, all the TV or cinema news program created by Anglo-Americans often show the city by its most important monuments. So that included fascist monuments, of course, such as the Monumento ai Caduti that you saw before, and also the Lighthouse of Victory. But fascism was never really mentioned on those programs. And indeed, the excuse we might say served by Anglo-Americans in this program was that those monuments were built to commemorate the First World War. So as a consequence, the presence of fascist monuments here in Trieste were very rarely questioned. And also fascist monuments quite kept their original symbolic purposes for the Italian community as being marks of the Italianity of the city, even after the city became fully Italian again in 1954. So now I want to go a bit further in time until 2014 to talk about how public history, which is a topic I'm very interested in, how public history projects, especially museums, managed those divided memories. So why 2014 is because we can actually mark the arrival of public history as an expression, but also with all the things that it implies in 2014, because it was the official creation of the Italian Association of Public History. And in fact, in Bolzano, it coincides with the opening of the exhibition inside the Monumento alla Vittoria. So the project actually initially in 2011, when Bolzano's county and the city of Bolzano decided to gather a group of historians and archivists from both of the language community, which is important, whose purpose was to create a permanent exhibition inside of the Monumento alla Vittoria. It's something that was asked for actually a very long time from the inhabitants to do something about this monument that could explain the monument, but also the historical period of fascism and Nazism. So the exhibition is in the undergrounds of the museum, as you can see, and it really succeeds to, even using very different documents from video to posters in a quite modern scenography to present the history of the construction, but also the life of the monument. And it adds also reflection on how it has been perceived from the inhabitants, and also how it was used by the different political regimes that succeeded until today. But although it really succeeds to tell and reflect on the history of Bolzano during fascism and during the Nazi occupation. And the working group that also installed an object outside of the monument, you can see it's the one, the red circle that you can see, to notify to any person that came along the monument that there is something, that the monument is not just like this. Then in Trieste, I wanted to talk about two museums that we can say have the merit, the credit to talk about the fascist and the Nazi period in the city. So the first one is the Museum of the Jewish Community, Carlo and Vera Wagner, which was opened in 1993 and refurbished in 2014, sorry. So the museum tells the story of the Jewish community in Trieste since the Middle Ages, but until today. But it gives a very important space to the fascist and Nazi period in the city. The other museums I want to talk about is the Museum de Riviera San Saba. So the Riviera functioned during the Second World War as a Nazi concentration camp for the detention, but also the killing of political prisoners. And it was also a transit camp for Jewish people, most of whom were then deported to Auschwitz. So the Riviera became a national monument in 1965 and transformed into a museum in 1975. But all the exhibition spaces were very recently redesigned. As you can see, it's a quite modern scenography. So we can say that in Bolzano, public history projects initiated by the city in real collaboration with local historians, archivists, and inhabitants, I think are really interesting, and they do work. The autonomous region and the city understand that those projects and behind them the work of explaining contemporary history of the city was a necessity to appease the tension between the communities. But also I think it's because the German community has a majority. So its revendication have a real echo for local authorities. In Trieste, instead, fascist monuments have not been questioned as in Bolzano. And in fact, we can say that fascist monuments in Trieste quite melted in the urban landscape. But I don't think it erased the tension anyway. And I wanted to finish on this last example, to continue on museums. So this is an example of fascist monument that is generating several debates among historians. It is the Museum of the Risorgimento, which is in the Casa del Combattente, which the House of the Fighter, we might say, which is near to the Oberdan's Aquarium in the Oberdan Square, so in Trieste. This museum was opened in 1934, and it presents the history of Risorgimento and the First World War in Trieste with a series of objects, sculptures, paintings. But the thing is that all of those themes were presented following the fascist rhetoric. So, for example, there is absolutely no mention of the Slavic community, or is no mention of how violent and traumatic the First World War was for civilians, for example. So the museum is now managed by the City Council, but also from the Lega Nazionale, which is an association created in 1891, who, I quote from their website, works for the Italianity of Trieste. And the problem is that almost nothing has changed since the opening of the museum in 1934. And also on the museum website, there is no mention of the fascist period. So, sorry, local historians quite disagree on what to do with this museum. And there is, for example, Gaetano Dato, who underlined that this is a fascist museum, but he thinks that the city must leave it as it is now, because it allows to show how fascism used to talk about the Risorgimento and the First World War in Trieste. But for other historians, it is impossible to leave it as it is, and that this historical period and also the historical events that are represented in the museum must be explained to the visitors, especially the young ones. So I think the debate is still it's complicated. It's a complicated debate, but it's still quite wide open. And I wanted to conclude with the words of Thomas Covin, which I cannot wait to hear tonight, who suggests to his students that the first thing to do when dealing with problematic and sensitive monuments is to foster public discussion to see if the monument is unwanted and by whom. And in any case, that removing the monument without discussion does not solve the problem. And I think that's what historians can do. It's to foster the public discussion. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Iris, for this interesting paper. José Manuel, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you, Bruno. Thank you very much, Iris, for this fantastic paper. And I very much like the contrast between South Tyrol and Trieste. But I'm wondering whether you could expand a little bit more on a recent controversy, which I guess it was very important in Trieste local politics, which referred to the recent opening and inauguration of a statue devoted to Gabriele D'Annunzio. on the port of Trieste. I think it was something like by the end of 2019, if I'm not wrong. And it portrays Gabriele D'Annunzio looking at Rijeka, looking at Fiume, and in a way claiming that, I mean, Italians, or it's Italian nationalists still dreams of coming back again, or taking up again this territory. And this was, of course, included within the commemorations of this Trieste, Fiume occupation by the D'Annunzio's legionnaires, etc. Could you expand a little bit more on the local impact of this polemics, of this controversy in Trieste, and what does that mean to your paper, to your presentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. Iris, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much for this this question. Yeah, yeah, I don't know if you have this statue in mind, but it was also quite, it was polemical also because it was quite humorous, because so the statue of D'Annunzio is just sitting on a bench on the Piazza della Borsa, which is a main square in Trieste, and it is seated and reading some books, but it was too small, so it doesn't touch the floor. So a lot of jokes were around the statue also. Yeah, what can I say? It's actually, it's I think in the same level that I said about the Museum of Risorgimento, how powerful association, nationalist association, irredentist association like the Lega Nazionale are in the city of Trieste, and how much also this, how can I say it, but yeah, these very vivid debates on the Italianity, sorry, of Istria, but also of Dalmatia, are yeah, vivid and controversial. I don't know how to add more, but yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Thank you, Iris.